Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. So in this video, I am going to give you 10 movies that I always watch in the October season or in or around the Halloween season. For me, Halloween has always been about the make-believe, the strange and unusual, the ghosts, the monsters, the vampires, the werewolves, all that kind of stuff, the paranormal, supernatural. That's what Halloween has always been about for me. So these 10 movies will all kind of have that kind of vibe to them. You're not going to see any sort of like serial killer movies or true crime horror movies in this list because for me, those kinds of things can happen in real life and I can watch those movies at any time of the year. But these movies in particular, I only tend to watch them in October or the fall season because they just have that kind of vibe to them, that ghost story, make-believe kind of vibe that we know isn't real, but it works so well in the Halloween season. So yeah, let's just get straight into the 10 movies. So first up, we have a movie that is probably the only one in this list that isn't really a horror movie, but it still does have sort of those horror elements to it. And it is The Addams Family Values. So this is the second Addams Family movie that came out in the early 90s. And whilst I do like the first Addams Family, for me, that one kind of has more of a madcap kind of feel to it. It feels a lot like the 1960s TV show Addams Family, whereas this one has a lot more of those dark, macabre elements to it. And for me, this movie just works so much better. I think the story for this one is a lot better as well. But everyone who plays the family in this movie, they're just so good in it. Raul Julia, Angelica Houston, Christopher Lloyd, and Christina Ricci as Wednesday. We all love Jenna Ortega, but for me, there's no one better than Christina Ricci as the character of Wednesday. She's just on point in this movie. And the movie's just a lot of fun. Like I said, it's not a horror movie, but it does have those horror elements and, some of the dark, macabre kind of stuff to it. And it's just a lot of fun. I have a lot of nostalgia for it, so that probably helps why I always watch it in the fall season. But yeah, I think it's a fantastic film and one that I always watch in and around October. So yeah, that is The Addams Family Values. Next up, we have an Italian anthology film, and we have Black Sabbath, directed by Mario Bava. So yeah, this is probably the sort of the lesser known film in my list of 10 films, but for me, this is one of my favourite horror movies that I've seen in the last few years. It's comprised of 3 stories. The first one involves a woman who's being stalked by this man who keeps calling her on the telephone. That story is not that good for me, but the other 2 more than make up for it. You have the middle story, which has the great Boris Karloff in it, and it involves this really peculiar family that live in this ranch in the countryside, and there's definitely something a bit off with them. And then you have the third story, which involves this witch, and it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen in a horror movie. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that I saw this movie for the first time, but that part of the film scared the hell out of me, and this movie just has a great atmosphere, a great vibe, very dark, just has all those sorts of elements that work so well when you watch it really late at night, in a cold October or November night. It just works so well. Very creepy film. It scared me to death the first time I saw it. But yeah, that is Black Sabbath. Next up, we have another anthology film, and this time we have Creepshow, released in 1982. And what I love about this film is that I just love how this film kind of pays tribute to, why we all love horror and why it became so popular to begin with. I mean, I feel like horror has been popular for a very long time, but I feel like it was in the 1950s when it really took off, with horror anthology shows and comic books and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like Creepshow is just a great movie that pays tribute to that sort of era of horror. As well as that, it's one of those great 80s horror movies that makes such good use of practical effects, gore, makeup, all that good stuff that we horror fans, love and adore. You've also got just so many big hitters in this movie with George Romero directing. You've got the involvement of Stephen King and Tom Savini. And the 5 stories in this movie are just so much fun. Some are quite scary, some are a bit more on the comedy side, but they've all just got this great atmosphere to them. And again, it's just a movie that I absolutely love watching around Halloween or in October. But yeah, that is Creepshow. Next up, we have The Fog, directed by John Carpenter. Now, I have to admit, this isn't one of my personal favourite John Carpenter films, but for me, this is definitely one of the John Carpenter films, along with Halloween, of course, that I always watch in October. This movie just evokes that classic ghost story feel to it. I mean, the movie even begins with this old man telling these kids around a campfire a ghost story. That's how the movie begins, and then it just goes off from there. So it just has this great sort of ghost story vibe to it. But everything about this film, the atmosphere, the music, it works so well with this type of movie. It's just so good to watch, especially really late at night on, a cold October night. And like I said, it's not one of my favorite John Carpenter movies, but it's definitely one of his best when it comes to the Halloween season. So yeah, that is The Fog. Next up, we have Fright Night, released in 1985. So if you know me, you'll probably know that I am a huge fan of this film. This is probably a contender for my favourite horror movie of all time. And again, like Creepshow, this is just one of these great movies that pays tribute to why we love horror. I just love, the character of Peter Vincent. He just feels like he's trying to be Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. It just has that classic sort of vibe to it, whilst also being its own entity as a 1980s film. But everything about this movie just works. The direction from Tom Holland is great. His script is so solid. All of the characters are so likable and played so well by all of the actors involved. And you have a great villain with Chris Sarandon playing Jerry Dandridge. And again, it's another one of these great 80s horror movies that makes great use of practical effects and the gore, the makeup. And again, it just has such a good atmosphere. I keep using the word atmosphere, but for me, atmosphere is everything in a horror movie. And especially, horror movies that I watch during the Halloween season. And this is definitely one of them that I always watch in October. And I'll also give a special shout out to Fright Night 2 as well. Whilst it isn't quite as good as Fright Night 1, it is still a really solid sequel. And I normally tend to watch the two of them together at some point during Halloween. I just love them so much. But yeah, that is Fright Night and Fright Night Part 2. Next up, we have a movie from the Halloween series. And yeah, you have to have a Halloween movie in this list. And I could literally put all of the movies from that series in this list. Whether I like all the movies or not is a different thing. But yeah, I'm only going to choose one, and I'm not going to go with the original Halloween. I'm actually going to go with my personal favourite, which is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. This is a movie that I will always watch on the 31st of October every single year. Again, if you know me, you'll probably know this is one of my all-time favourite horror movies. It's the black sheep of the franchise. It's the only one that doesn't have Michael Myers in it. And I know for a long time that a lot of people just didn't like this movie, but I feel like in recent years, it's definitely gained a much bigger following, which I am so happy for, because I just think it's a fantastic film. Again, it's one of those movies that it feels like it was shot during Halloween, and I think it helps that the movie is set sort of in the week leading up to Halloween, and then the end of the movie is set on Halloween night. So it always feels great to watch it on the 31st of October. The lights out, maybe some candles drawn. It's just a great movie to watch at Halloween. The movie itself is fantastic. Again, it has a great atmosphere, great music by John Carpenter, pretty interesting story, and one of the greatest endings ever in a horror movie. I get chills every time I watch it. I just love this movie, and I'm so glad that it seems to have a much better reputation than it used to, because, yeah, it's such a fantastic movie, and definitely one of my favourites to watch during Halloween, and that is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Next up, we have Night of the Living Dead. Now, again, I could have gone with any of the first three George A. Romero Dead movies, but I decided to go with Night of the Living Dead because for me, out of the three of them, this one is probably the scariest. And for me, it just kind of evokes that classic horror kind of feel to it. There's just something about black and white horror movies that works so much better, and that color horror movies just can't quite evoke this certain kind of atmosphere. But this one just has plenty of it. And like I said, it's a very creepy movie. And it's just so much fun to watch, especially during that Halloween season. It's a classic horror movie, one that has shocked people ever since it first came out, and it still does to this day. It's not my personal favourite of the three George A. Romero Dead movies, but like I said, I do think it is the creepiest, the scariest, and just has that sort of great atmosphere to it. But that is Night of the Living Dead. Next up, we have Phantasm. Now, again, if you know me, you'll know that I am a huge fan of this movie, and I'm a huge fan of the Phantasm franchise, and I watch the entire franchise every October. But I've gone with the first Phantasm in this case because, again, this is one of those great horror movies that just has such a fantastic atmosphere. I know I keep using the word atmosphere, but like I said, that is what makes a great horror movie for me. And this one just has plenty of it. And I think what's interesting about this film is that the story is a little bit bizarre and a bit ambiguous, and it can be a bit confusing at times. And I think the intention with this film is that it's meant to disorientate you, and even by the time the film's over, you might still be wondering what was going on in this movie. But that's what I love about it, and I think the sort of the mysteriousness of this film kind of heightens the tension, and it heightens that scare factor, and that's what I love so much about this film. And yeah, like I said, it's just got such a great atmosphere, and it's one of those films that I think it does have a lot of fans, but I feel like it could do with some more fans. For me, I just absolutely love it, and I love all of the movies in this franchise. But that is Phantasm. Next up, we have another vampire movie, and this time we have Salem's Lot. This is the TV miniseries that was released in 1979, based on the novel by Stephen King. Now, I have to put this movie in this list, not just because I watch it every October, but out of all of the movies that scared me as a kid, this was the one that scared me the most. Now, if you've seen the movie, you'll probably know which scene I'm talking about, but it involves the young boy who is turned into a vampire, and he's floating towards the window, and he's scratching on it, and everything about that scene, you know, the little boy's makeup, the music, the lighting of that scene, like that scene scared me to death, and the movie stuck with me ever since. But I just think it is a fantastic movie. Yes, it's 3 hours long, you know, you can watch it in 2 parts, but every time I watch it, it just flies by. And again, I'm going to use this word, but this movie probably has the greatest atmosphere in a horror movie. Everything about it, you know, just the locations, the lighting, the makeup, the music, the performances from the actors, everything about it just evokes this classic horror movie kind of feel to it. And it's just so good to watch in the October Halloween season. And it's just a fantastic movie. It's just below Fright Night for me as one of the best vampire movies out there. But yeah, that is Salem's Lot. And then the last movie we have is, again, another anthology movie. One movie that is probably a bit more modern than most of the others that I've said. And we have Trick or Treat, which I think was released in 2007. And like I said, this is a horror anthology, but it's a slightly different twist on the horror anthology in that it's set within the same town, but we just follow different characters on Halloween night and, you know, the different stories involving them. But I just love this film because I love how all of the stories kind of interconnect, and this movie just has everything you could want from a horror movie. It has vampires, it has werewolves, it has ghost stories, serial killers, has, you know, some scary elements and some comedic elements, and it just works so well. I think besides John Carpenter's Halloween, this is probably the one movie that best represents Halloween itself, and the day and the night of Halloween. And along with Halloween 3, this is a movie I always watch on the 31st of October. It's just a fantastic film, and I think it's bound to become a classic for a lot of horror fans, and for fans of Halloween movies. It's a fantastic film, and yeah, I just absolutely love it. So that is Trick or Treat. So there you go, guys. Those are 10 movies that I watch in October or around the Halloween season. There are so many more movies that I watch other than those 10, but obviously I just wanted to keep this list as short as possible. But let me know in the comments below what you think of these movies, and let me know what movies you love to watch in October or around Halloween or Halloween night. I would love to hear your thoughts, but until then, I will leave the video there. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.